there's 100 to 1 or 10 to 1 that 10 people should not know the aspects about a network policy, because their job and resume and career is around building a feature rich service, right? They already have a lot of things to worry about, those 100 people. Then we flip the coin and like, well, we have the other team that care about like, what is the network policy we're going to use? What's the resource limits? What are the limit ranges? We already have that cognitive load ourselves. We don't want to worry about like which the Python libraries or the Node.js, because that's not our job, right? So but coming together of like those two teams is, I think, what platform engineer is about.
Welcome to another edition of Cloud Unfiltered. I'm your host, Michael Chenetz, and today I have Carlos Santana. Welcome, Carlos. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi there. Yes, I'm a specialist solutions architect with AWS. I've been working with AWS for the last about 2 years, and before that, I worked with other cloud providers and in the area of like distributed computing. And lately, I've been working for the last 6 years in Kubernetes, like in platform engineering, GitHub, CI/CD, and in AWS, I'm focusing on ECAS, everything ECAS as a solutions architect, working with customers in terms of like getting workloads on Kubernetes, and also using Kubernetes as a API for infrastructure as code. And I think we're going to be talking about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Everything kind of evolves, but you could kind of, if you're in the industry enough, you can kind of see where it's going to go over time. And I think that what we're going to be talking about today is more around like platform development and really the way that I think, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think that one of the reasons we've gotten to this place is that people are getting frustrated with the kind of many different approaches that you can take in the cloud native world. And in order to standardize that, I kind of feel like platform development came out of that need to pick a platform that you can use, and it doesn't really matter which platform. All of them have their pros and cons, but pick something that you can use that kind of standardize the way that you interact with this, GitOps and cloud native environment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like before containers, you can say we were having the same discussion with Linux, right? Which Linux operating system you were using, right?
Yep.
Were you using CNOS? Are you using SUSE, Linux? Before SUSE and Red Hat, right? They were also like, I used to remember having a stack of CDs that I ordered on the mail, and I got them all,
Yep.
right? But it was Linux, right?
Yep.
That was the standard.
I was one of those people that decided to take 2 weeks and do Gentoo Linux and try and figure out like optimize my PC the right way and just build it all from scratch.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we are at that point when you want to say standards with containers, right? On trying to get processes running on an operating system with containers, and nobody's that's becoming the standard. So when we talk about platform, I would not even say platform engineering. Like when we talk about platforms, we're talking about standards, right? Everybody's using the same APIs, and that becomes a standard. It may not be the most optimal one, right? Because we used to have like, I think microkernels. Well, why microkernels are not like famous and used everywhere? There's the most efficient way of running like a process. Why is containers? Well, with containers, you want the usability and it become a standard, right? They're very useful, and then the community got around it to make it a standard, and now we have a bunch of container runtimes, right? We have Cryo, we have Containerd, we have Docker, we have but the users that are using a container, choosing a container, like, I don't know what's behind it, right? Is I'm using, I feel safe choosing to run an application in containers because I know it's going to run everywhere, right? I
Yep.
don't have to change my app from runtime to runtime. I'm just using a container.
Yeah, absolutely, and that adds a lot of complexity. It simplifies in some ways, but it adds complexity on the development side in terms of you need a lot of YAML files, you need Docker containers, you need all these other things and all these other elements, and you also need to verify and test your code, and you need to do SBOMs and all these other areas that the world around the containers has become a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I would say I sometimes when it depends who you talk to, right? The good thing is I have certain experience with different technologies, and I've been wearing different roles in my career. One of them I was a developer, right? So it depends what is your cognitive load.
Yeah,
And to run software like enterprise software, it requires a lot of domain expertise.
yeah,
And one single human being may not have all of those. And we can say the same thing when I was a front end developer, right? People would that were new to front end developer would tell me like, this is too difficult. Like this
yep,
package.json and this npm and these like different ways of running my web app and live reloading and how do I do a debugging on my JavaScript app and how do I run it in the browser and right the same exact same thing because you're new to that space.
yeah,
So the same thing is for developers talking about maybe Kubernetes or how do I use Kubernetes, how to use containers, because their cognitive load is on their programming side, right? Like, how do I access the Stripe API? How do I
yeah,
access a AI model through a REST API and send a prompts, right? That's their domain, not my application getting deployed, right? So it's both sides of the coins, right? It's the same thing. We throw an infra person into front end. They will say this is too complex. We throw a front end person into infra, like this is too complex,
yep.
and the security folks on the next in the coffee shop, they're laughing at both of us, right? Because their work is even more complex.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. But that's really, I mean, to get back to it, that's really why, a lot of this is important. This platform ops and and IDPs and all of this stuff. So where are we going with this?
Based on my experience, I've been working with a lot of customers since I joined with AWS. And what they want to provide is an onboarding for the developers. And the thing that we have to realize is sometimes we live in a bubble. We have to realize that the number of developers, in this case, is the front end, we call it like the feature engineers, like some FE
Mhm.
for some lingo. The FEs, right? It could be 100 to 1.
Yeah.
So there's 100. We are hiring. These companies are hiring massive number of uh, feature engineers because that's what there's the value, right? Adding features
Hmm.
to the platform, to the services, and they need running them on the cloud is a need. It's not something that they would like to do, right? They like the features.
Hmm.
We used to send DVDs and software and CDs, but it's the cloud. So the ratio is like then your IT department is smaller. Like regardless where you are, your IT department will be smaller. So those individuals in the IT department or the platform engineering team or the DevOps team, it's a small team and they need to get uh, able to automate as much as possible. And also like let's not give them all the choices to these front feature engineers like the developers because they're busy like building the feature. So can we build a standard way of doing things? So that's why I think platform engineers a standard way of doing things in our company. So if they decide to use AWS Cloud, for example, if they decide to use ECS or Kubernetes, uh, like they're making choices for them. And then the developers will need like a database or how to run locally. How do I start a project? So that adoption of creating a platform and getting adoption is what this IT team is going to get velocity on doing their work, right? More efficient on doing that. So that's what I see. That's why I guess the term internal developer platforms come from is a standard way to provide to your internal feature engineers or developers because at the end of the day everyone is a developer like persona, right? There's people that are
Hmm.
going to work with network security, writing the programs and testing, but just to focus on one of personas is like that developer that needs to be able to get their application from the laptop to the cloud, right? That's the net of it, and it should not take weeks, and it should not take days, and it should not take hours, right? It should take minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny and it's very reflective because even at the last KubeCon in Paris, what you saw were two big themes. One was AI, obviously, and the other was, platform engineering. That were the two big things that I saw. I mean, you could tell me what you think, but those were the common elements and themes in what I thought I saw in Paris.
Yeah. And in KubeCon, there were like there's two aspects to that, right? The AI is one is companies trying to run or use AI or run AI compute on a standard way, and Kubernetes becoming that standard
Yeah.
on that. That's like, well, how do I run the model? How do I deploy it? Where the containers? Well, how do I run a bunch of containers together? It might be, and if you're doing on premise, it will be Kubernetes, and then if you're planning to when you're at scale, then you're like, well, I need more GPUs, and I don't have enough GPU cards sitting around the house. How do I use them? Pay as you go, right?
Yep.
So, but I don't need to rewrite my app. I don't have to rewrite my CI/CD pipeline. How Kubernetes, it might be the best choice for you to run them on Kubernetes on the cloud, unless you're looking into maybe using an API, right? We have things like Bedrock, and some platforms have like you just go to an API, and then there's startup, right, or the cloud provider is the one using Kubernetes behind the scenes. Like somebody at the end of the day is using a container or using Kubernetes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really interesting to see those two things, and it just kind of reinforces what we're talking about, that platform engineering and AI are the two big things. And I know I said reinforce, and by the way, I should probably say that reinforce was AWS's conference that's going out 15 minutes from me in Philly right now.
Yep, yeah, our security
But
conference that we're doing. Yep.
yep, yep. So I didn't mean to say that and kind of conjumble those things. But anyway, going back to platform engineering, so you guys are working on some open source and doing some other things around this area. What? So tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, so my team and myself, we're working in AWS with some customers to create a community open source project. And it's the name is called Cano. People can find it in canoe.io, CNOE.io. Some people mention it like I just like to call it Canoe. But it's a community of customers that want to use Kubernetes as the API for building that internal developer platform. And because they're it's that IT team that I was talking about. Like IT team decided like we are good on like using Kubernetes and providing Kubernetes. And by the way, we're using Kubernetes to run compute. Let's use Kubernetes as an API framework or programming model to provide more APIs to not just run the compute, but also configure the cloud dependencies.
So it's like a
Um,
control plane for
it's a control
everything.
plane.
It's that. But now I think about that. What's the difference between that and something like crossplane? Because crossplane has a similar idea to that. I'm just, because I honestly didn't know what Canoe did. I've heard of it in the past, but so what are the differences there, or maybe?
No, no. So is crossplane is one of the ways. And by the way, I have a book club, and I had like it's five. There's a book called Crossplane, and we had 5 weeks with Victor in my book club on that. But
Yeah.
Canoe uses Crossplane. That's one of the tools. So
Oh, cool.
Canoe is kind of like prescriptive guidance of like there's so many tools to create an IDP, an internal developer platform. Can we choose? Can we decide as a community? These customers are coming together, and these are like large customers like Nike, Twilio, Adobe. They're building internal developer platforms, but we're creating a community so they can talk to each other to first talk about like selecting the tools and then how to put them together. So I think there we already like selected the tools, so things like Crossplane or things
Gotcha.
like ACKs, and then we have customers building their own controllers with KubeBuilder. KubeBuilder is a framework to create
Hmm.
APIs in Kubernetes, and basically you're creating CRDs that represents APIs, and those APIs could be a Jira ticket with a database on the cloud, with combining a config map. Like it's an API that gives you abstractions, and Kubernetes the kind of like the runtime for that control plane. But in but we're used. So the next question is like, uh, if they want to accelerate or building that IDP, what are the best practices or the tutorial or maybe some tooling to help put them together, right? So we started with, we have like two tools already. We have a lot of documentation, but we have two tools. One is called the IDP builder, like internal developer platform builder, CLI, and that's the main one that we are focusing in, because it's like, how do we make the platform engineer life easier, that they can reproduce their platform locally, make changes, like enhance it, like either a controller or maybe a UI aspect. Like we use, we also integrate examples on Backstage, a UI, as a portal, um, make a change, and then using GitOps as the main component. So everything goes through GitOps. So we have like Argo CDs, one example of GitOps. So this is a CLI that basically you run in your laptop, and you point to a folder, and it comes up. And the two building blocks of this tool CLI is Argo CD, and a interesting one. A second one is Git server. So there's a project called Git T, so that way you can develop locally and you don't have to change every commit to the cloud or a Git server. You can be in airplane mode, and it comes
Oh, that's
super fast.
awesome.
Like in 2 minutes, you have Argo CD and a Git server. And the cool thing is that CLI is also a Kubernetes controller that will watch your folders. So as you make changes in your folder, automatically creates a Git repo, automatically syncs the files to the Git server. So you don't have to do Git push or Git commit or anything like that. You quickly change a YAML file, save in your editor, and boom, there's a new database definition. Locally, it could be locally because we have examples with local stack, or it could be remotely if you have it connected to through crossplane to the cloud. um, and then you can make the changes like this is more for a platform engineer, but it can also be used for development. But mostly we're focusing on like that platform engineer that is trying to wrestle with YAML files,
I
get
love
them
that.
together, but in a quick way, right? Because
Yeah.
we kind of like, everybody has needs to finding in search online, like how to put together crossplane, a Git server, external circuit operator, cert manager, nginx, Argo
Yep.
CD. And this, we're giving you recipes, and we call
I
them
love that.
stacks. And you just like git clone, run the CLI, and I just added a new feature called and I've been like the community is great because I've been creating a lot of issues. I'm like putting all my crazy ideas into issues, and they just like next week I come to the community meeting like, oh, we got it, got it working, like, oh my god. So the last one was the ability to do this, run the CLI, and then instead of pointing to a local folder that has the example or the package, it could be a URL in a GitHub repo. So now GitHub repos and those folders, you can run the CLI -p and point to a remote location. So I have a, maybe I have a couple of packages, you have a couple of packages, you can run the CLI tool with 3 packages, and in a few minutes it's up and running everything in your laptop like quickly. And companies like Autodesk is even using this system in their CI/CD pipeline to test the platform. So one aspect is building a platform, like for example, you just we things like Backstage, where you click a button, say I want to develop an app that is going to be Go, that connects to a RDS database, and it's going to scaffold a GitHub repo with the YAML files with the name that you selected. So the platform engineer is building that template. How do we test it with automation end to end? So they're using CI/CD to generate this template. Then Backstage is just APIs, calling the API end to end test, double checking that the YAMLs are created correctly, running IDP builder CLI, bringing up Kubernetes, testing that everything's done, and then shutting down. Like a lot of people are doing the platform, but they're forgetting about the end-to-end test. Like, somebody makes a pull request to change something to this workflow, we need to be able to test it quickly, first in my laptop, and secondly in the CI/CD. So kind of like that's the story that I'm telling. Like in a lot of live streams, I'm doing live streams for the platformers community, and we have like a couple of episodes on Cano. But that's kind of like, what are the tools to put together? What are the practices that these companies are already doing internally. These are massive customers, that they have massive number of developers. And how do we bring that knowledge to other companies, right? To start building that. And we're doing this in the CNCF Slack, and also giving talks in different conferences.
First of all, I think this is amazing. Now that you've described what it is, I'm actually going to download it and take a look at it, because it sounds like it could solve a need that I have too. And I find that the best solutions are usually the ones that solve a real problem. And for you and for a lot of people in the CNCF or around the CNCF, um, we see all the problems that occur, and usually that's where these solutions come, and that's why if you've seen a lot of adoption, then obviously a lot of other people are seeing the need for something like this too.
Yeah, so a lot of companies are struggling, right, to do this internally, because they're trying to find standard ways of doing this. And first of all, they start with documentation, but documentation gets outdated very quickly.
Yeah.
So the automation, right, these IT departments are getting better at doing automation. So this is all about automating the workflow. So CI/CD doesn't take weeks, like I was mentioning at the beginning of the discussion, right? It doesn't take weeks, doesn't take days. This should be something that is automated, and it's around GitOps. And the aspect of like what is in Git is the desired state. And when somebody makes a pull request or change request, they can see a delta of a feature or a bug. And you know that when that gets merged, the workflow kicks off, right? Everything gets automated, from the testing to the production. So that's something that also is solving the problem of like a lot of developers are working with their application locally, and when they submit their code into Git, like we use developers use Git, then that first day zero, they get a lot of like calls and back and forth because it's not working. It's working in staging, but it's not working in production, because they in development they have access to everything.
Yep.
In production, maybe you have a namespace constrained to a specific namespace, constrained to the number of pods that you can run. The configuration and the secrets come from a different place, and you don't want to change your like code to modify based on the environment. You should write in your code. It doesn't matter where it runs. We go back to the container standard. Like I should be able to create a Docker file or have a container built with any other tools. Like that, at the end of the day, you don't have to use even a Docker file, but you're creating a OCI artifact, right? And
Mhm.
an image, which at the end of the day is a TGC, and that's the secret. But it's a TGC that is a standard, right?
Yeah.
That everybody can know, like, oh, I know what is in there, has a manifest associated, we can run it. Why we cannot do that the same thing for applications, right? Applications and its dependencies, because a lot of applications don't run in a silo. Most
Yeah.
applications run with calling APIs, and that API could be cache, it could be a database, it could be a payment service, it could be an AI service, right? Um, an AI service like Amazon Bedrock, right? Or it could be an AI service running inside the same Kubernetes cluster, for inferring, like frameworks like Ray, which is very popular among our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still this large contingency of people that are new to cloud native, and so they'll end up just getting the container up and running, and it's great they've done that, but then trying to get it to prod is a lot different. There's a lot of policies, there's a lot of security considerations that you need to do, and honestly, the even though there's a lot of education out there, there's a lot, and sometimes that's even worse, is because you don't know what to believe, and the other thing is that it's moving so fast that documentation gets outdated very quickly. So that's another reason why something like what you guys are doing is very needed.
Yeah, and using Kubernetes, more like Kubernetes is using GitOps, like that aspect of like you have files, configuration files in Git that
Hmm.
describe the end result or like infrastructure as data, like Kelsey likes to call it. Kelsey is one of the community heroes in Kubernetes, like
Yep.
infrastructure as code versus infrastructure as data. Kubernetes is based on the promise theory, right? That you put this file that is just plain data, and that's the desired, like enough configuration for the system to then continue, right? And nothing is like zeros and ones, because we you have some dynamic aspects when you run these workloads or you configure these workloads, and then you need to have dynamic aspects of it to have good automation, right? And self-healing. One perfect example is like the HPA, right? Horizontal pod autoscaler. You don't put the number of replicas you want in your pod, right? It should dynamically adjust, but you put like the boundaries, right? You say like how many max, how many min
Yep.
do you need? The same thing for like for Kubernetes clusters. Like I was working with a customer on upgrades. So you put like how many is the storage, what is the max unavailable using PDBs. So that continues to that end, and it's a configuration. It's a configuration that you store somewhere, and Git is one of the tools that a lot of like in software development we use for that. And at scale, um, when you have thousands of applications, right? You need to have something around GitOps and something around templating, like things like Customize or Helm, which we use in the project. So it's kind of like difficult for a lot of companies to like once they selected like yes we're going to use Kubernetes. Next thing is like we need to build a pipeline, right? And we need to build like how developers are going to be onboarded. And companies like I saw the other day, which has a they have a good blog, is Grammarly. Grammarly has a concept of like platform university. So the thing is, you build it, but they will not come. You have to build your IDP, and you have to do that DevRel kind of thing of like you have to when somebody comes into the company, they don't know anything about your system. Like what would be
Yep.
their university on the platform? Like their day zero and then the day two, because day two is like how do I get the logs and the metrics when this app is running, right? How do we learn more about how the app is behaving so we can add features? um, and that's the day two. But the day zero, so teaching folks that maybe coming out of the university, right? The thing that I have realized is I'm getting older, and like I have kids, and now they're in the university, and they're coming out with certain knowledge from college or maybe a boot camp. um, but we me and you, we have experience in the field, right? We have come from like installing Linux
Yep.
on a bare metal machine to now like, well, we just create some configuration file, run a tool, and then I have a bunch of VMs running Linux, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been, it's funny that how everything's evolving. I mean, now it's been 10 years of Kubernetes, and you just did something that was a, you were talking a little bit pre-show about how you've run one of the original commits or something like that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so June 6th is the 10th anniversary of Kubernetes. um, and I'm a CNCF ambassador, so I'm part of the CNCF also. And what we did in CNCF, we created a kind of a batch pattern Kubernetes around the world. And I did one here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live. I created I organize a meetup. I bought some cakes and have people come in, and I wanted to do something fun. So I did one of the things that I did was a trivia, which I can give you the link to a document has all the trivia things like what was the first semantic version of Kubernetes, right? What was the first commit of Kubernetes? 1.0 wasn't until 2015, so it's 9 years of since the 1.0. But what we did was to kind of like show appreciation of like what are the things that you can do with Kubernetes today, because a lot of people say like, it's complex, not
Mhm.
finished. Well, the idea is like it should not be finished because it's an open source project, right?
Yeah.
But how bad or how was the user experience, not say bad, but how was the user experience when the first commit happened, right? When the first when this got into GitHub, and it was there. And I started like me and other CNCF ambassadors started looking at like maybe we can get 1.0 running in our laptop so people can see like there was no deployments. What's called replication controller. There was no stateful sets. What's called pet set. Um, and we got 1.0 running. So I'll give you the link so you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So we got Kubernetes 1.0 up and running very easily, with a like very retro, like Ubuntu 15 back in the days, with the with the container Docker version of back in the days. And by the way, don't run this in production
Yeah.
because you have other CVs. Well, we got it up and running very quickly because 1.0 had binaries already released. So it was a matter of running etcd, Kube API, kubelet, and I think that's it, proxy and controller, like a couple of binaries, and we got it up and running. So it was fun to do that. And then it's like, well, what was there in the first commit that Joe Beta did?
Yep.
So we went back and we were able to compile the code. We changed a few things, but there was no kubectl. There was no kube. Before kubectl was called kubecfg, and before that was called cloud cfg. Um, so, and there was no namespaces. Imagine yourself Kubernetes with no namespaces. There was no deployments. So to appreciate like all the hard work to create APIs to last for a long time. So that's the promise of Kubernetes, that APIs should last for a long time. And the recent releases of Kubernetes, we have reached a milestone that we're not deprecating more APIs. We're not removing APIs. And they're establishing APIs that are stable. So as you upgrade Kubernetes, it should be less painful. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
change much to it. So it was a fun activity, and we have it online, and we may just do a talk or a live stream around it so people appreciate like what how it was back then, right? The
Yeah.
same way when back then before containers or Docker, like what was life then? So you can appreciate where we are right now, and also think outside the box, like how Kubernetes, and that's what something I've been thinking about, like how Kubernetes v2.0 will look like, right?
Yeah.
Version 2. And what are the things that if we have to redo them in a new world, how would they look like?
Yeah. To me, I still want software. I'm in this world that I would love for, like, when you develop an application, that maybe you could put some metacode in there during that. I would have to figure out how you do compile time and all this other kind of stuff, but that could self-register with Kubernetes. So you can get rid of YAML files altogether.
Yeah.
That you could just say, hey, you know what, this is coming up. It's either in staging or prod or whatever it is, but it automatically self-registers. Get rid of the YAML files altogether and figure out ways. I think we're in a way with AI, with everything else that we have these days, that we can get it to a point where really you could just focus on the solution set that you want these days, and just make it so that things can self-register in a way that makes sense, not in a way that's dangerous. Obviously there's always ways to be dangerous, but maybe there's some kind of global set, and then maybe there's something that an application can register. I don't know, I haven't figured it out, but that's my dream.
And you're not far from the truth of getting there. Like that, this is the kind of the experience that the in the Cano project, this folks are doing with internal developer platforms, right? To give you the ability of going to a portal. And one of the demos that I did in one of the recent conference in DevOps Day was go to Backstage and then type a sentence. I told people like type a sentence of what are the things that you want to build, or what was like, I want to build a Node.js app that connects to a database and object store. And then I was able to use AI to look at what are the other apps built, what are the
Mhm.
AWS cloud provider that you're doing, and it give you back the code. And then with that code, basically put it in a Git repo. And with Cano and these IDPs, we have other systems that will wake up, like Argo CD will wake up when a new GitHub repo gets created, and there's no reason why you cannot look at that repo and say like, well, there's Node.js in here. And by the
Mhm.
way, the Node.js is referring SDKs to object store and a database. So this is the standard way we create object store, give access to store and database, and then the platform team takes over just by the input of, like you said, like your code, and analyze it. And then now we have AI, which is much easier to read unstructured code and parse things, and then have that be the journey of like you just like write an application and maybe register, like you said, register the application with the IT department, because we're this is the IT department. IT department is the one that is going to choose which cloud, right?
Yep.
if it's going to run on premise, which cloud, the security things. But it's like I have code or I have an idea, right? And just a prompt, put it into the portal, and then that idea becomes start becoming reality, right? Giving you like templates and code and go where to get started. And the machinery behind it, really depends on the company, like what cloud provider they're using, if they're using Kubernetes or they're using a something like ECS. So they would choose how to deploy your application, but you're not far from that. People should not need to know that we're using Kubernetes. Like
Yeah.
that would be my dream.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to me, it's funny because you go back and I'm the first one to tell you, and I've said this on many shows, is that I do not follow my own advice. But you know, people tend to go to a solution to create their app, meaning like they'll say, "Hey, I'm going to write this app for Kubernetes," and really, what you should be doing when you're considering an app is saying, "What are the requirements I need for this app? Do I need scalability? Do I need redundancy? Do I need multi-zone? Do I need, and does that match? What does that link up to? Is it Kubernetes? Is it, I don't know, WASM? Is it, whatever it is, but let the application dictate that. Now, as I said, I don't follow it. I'm the shiny object guy that just kind of follows the shiny object. But really, more companies should be looking at, do they even need this? Don't design. I mean, yes, you need to design afterwards once you've chosen that, but don't design specifically for that just because it's the cool thing to do, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, it's a cognitive load and the persona, right? There's a 100 to 1 or 10 to 1 that 10 people should not know the aspects of our a network policy,
Yeah.
right? In Kubernetes, because their job and resume and career is around building a feature rich service, right? And that's a combination of like, yeah, we need to use cache, we need to use our database, we need to use 3 APIs, we need to write the Python that is clean, we have to constrain on the unit test. Like they already have a lot of things to worry about, those 100 people. Then we flip the coin and like, well, we have the other team that I think were listening to this show, the platform nerds like myself, that care about like what is the network policy we're going to use, what's the resource limits, what are the limit ranges, what version of Kubernetes are we using, are the host operating system has the latest patch from the last 90 days that we have to upgrade Kubernetes. How was the best all those, we already have that cognitive load ourselves. We don't want
Yep.
to worry about like which the Python libraries or the Node.js, because that's not our job, right? So but coming together of like those two teams is, I think, what platform engineer is about, like giving that first team a self-service aspect that they can quickly start building their new feature and experimenting, right? A lot of companies are experimenting right now, even with AI. What will be the thing that is the next user experience for their own customers, right? And we're doing the same with AI. How we use AI to provide customers with the best experience. Things like Amazon Q in the console, right? Asking something in there, how do I do something? Or things like combining Bedrock and AI to analyze a cluster, why it's not optimized for cost, for performance, why is what to parse error logs, right, for the IT folks. So that's kind of, I think, what I see as a platform engineer is like it depends which team you're part of, and then what is the cognitive load you're trying to decrease.
And if you want to learn more about all of this, if you haven't, if you don't, if you just want to upskill a little bit, there is a book club. So why don't we just mention real quickly about that? And I'm actually going to join it probably this next time here.
Yeah. So I think this is a project that I started during the pandemic. um, because I used to go to a lot of meetups back before the pandemic. There was a lot of meetups here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was nice to on a Wednesday or Thursday to go, after work, just stop by into a meetup, a technical meetup. Like it was JavaScript. I went to iOS. I went to Kubernetes, and just meeting folks in person and talking to them, like what they're
Mhm.
working on, what are they learning, right? What are they using in their company? And then learning about new technology. And then when the pandemic, everybody like shut down. There was no aspect of that. So me and other folks, we were watching a lot the TGIK. Joe Beta was doing that on Fridays. It was a live stream, and he brought a book called Production Kubernetes. And that was a very, very good book that we started reading. And we decided, like, hey, let's get together on Fridays and let's start Zoom and talk about running Kubernetes in production. Because what's what interesting topic of, like, I have been doing it on my work of running Kubernetes production. Other folks like Eric Smith, which is a Docker captain, and other folks like from the Docker community and Kubernetes community, they were actually running Kubernetes in production. So just talking about that topic, right? Fun, this kind of virtual meetup, and then from that started doing every Friday since the pandemic. It's been like more than 3 years, and or every Friday now we switched to a more formal thing, not formal but more structured. Now it's a CNCF community meeting. We schedule books. We I bring the author of the book to just show a demo or talk about a chapter, and we schedule a couple of weeks for a book. And we added a new session on Thursday. So Thursdays is a different time zone. Folks from it's a little bit more for Europe and India. So I have a organizer doing Thursday. So they're doing a book on machine learning on Kubernetes. So you want to join that, you can join that. I just finished one with Victor. He wrote a book Crossplane. So we did 4 sessions, 4 Fridays. They're in YouTube, and there's also a podcast. And this week we're going to start Kubernetes on the edge, like how to run Kubernetes on Raspberry Pis, how to run AI on the edge, with Sergio Mendes, which is the book author, and he will come every Friday, and then we just like hang out for 1 hour, and we work on experts, we work on new people that want to learn Kubernetes in the community, and that's kind of like I guess my community service
I love
out
it.
there. I don't have a lot of time, but I think I still want to dedicate like 1 hour a week just to go to a meetup, right, virtually in my house.
Yeah. So I do this kind of segment where, and you probably heard it, where we talk about buzzworthy or buzzworthless. And I give you a term, and you could just describe whether it's buzzworthy or buzzworthless. It's usually related to what we're talking about.
Okay,
So
sounds fun.
yeah, so platform engineering, is it buzzworthy or buzzworthless?
I think what's worthy is becoming the DevOps plus plus buzzword.
Okay, so then lastly, DevOps, is that buzzworthy or buzzworthless
Yeah,
as
it's
well?
still applicable. I think the DevOps is about the culture, right, of those two teams working together and communicating, and then platform engineering is about like the standard, like the mechanics of implementing something that is self-serve. So I
Okay.
think there needs to be more involved, and like I said, more collateral out there.
And so lastly, what do you want to leave people with?
I think one of the things that I want to leave people is based on my role of working with many. I'm impressed, like so many customers running Kubernetes in production. Is everybody is in a different stage in their learning journey, and we have to have empathy.
Hmm.
Not everyone is an expert. Not everyone needs to be an expert, and we have to be if you're working with customers or you're in a position where you're helping your consultant or you're like an SA like me, and you're working with end users that are the primary job is not contributing to open source Kubernetes, right? That's not their daily job. Is their daily job is getting a business
Hmm.
secure, right? And getting a business to move forward and hire more people, right? And keep the ones that they have some empathy on how you come with solutions around if using Kubernetes, or meet them where they are. So they might not have the skills and the time to do an optimal solution, but you can get a good solution on things of maintaining Kubernetes, configuring Kubernetes, deploying it there. So I think that's the one I want to leave people with, is like have empathy, and also don't feel imposter syndrome, like we're
Yeah,
here
I
together.
love
And
that.
so I think that's what I've been want to leave people with, is like start thinking and listening, ask questions like why are you doing this, why are you doing that, and you will realize that it's about empathy, like meeting them where they are.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to leave this segment too. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been amazing, and I think we covered a lot of great topics today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right.